Shadows in Jerusalem. The streets of Jerusalem were cold. Not just from the wind that blew through the alleyways, but from the invisible walls built between people. At a corner near Mahan Yehuda Market, where tourists and locals brushed past each other every day, sat a man with a cracked violin case in front of him. His eyes were hollow, cheeks sunken. His name was Avi. No one really knew him. People only saw his worn brown coat, his trembling hands, and the single sentence written on a cardboard piece. I once had a house, a family, a name. Most walked past. Some dropped coins. Few made eye contact. But one afternoon changed everything. A large black armored car stopped across the street. At first, nobody paid attention. But when the door opened, a man in a dark suit stepped out, surrounded by bodyguards. Sharp eyes, a serious face, but something thoughtful in his step. It was Benjamin Netanyahu. He wasn't there for a campaign. No cameras followed. This was personal. Life sometimes falls apart quietly. Not with explosions, but with cracks that slowly swallow a person's entire world. Avi's story began like that. Once, he was a well-known carpenter. Not only in Jerusalem but in nearby towns as well. Passionate about his craft, every table, chair, and carved cabinet he made was a piece of art. His workshop was small but warm, located just outside the old city. His wife, Lee, worked in a flower shop across the street. Their life was simple but happy. Every morning they went to work together. Every evening, they walked home side by side. But then, cancer came. It started with a lump in Lee's breast. Doctors said early diagnosis, but the treatment was harsh. Avi spent all their savings on hospital bills, treatments, private nurses. Their bank account drained quickly. He mortgaged the workshop. Business suffered. But the greatest loss was hope. Lee passed away after a 3-year battle. That day, not just a woman died, Avi's spirit was buried too. When he returned home, Lee's favorite daisies were still on the table. Everything else was the same, but the house was empty. He barely remembered the first months. They passed in a blur of alcohol, sleepless nights, and silent tears. Debts grew. The mortgage went unpaid. The workshop, then the house, everything was sold. One morning, with only Lee's old jacket in hand, Avi stepped onto the street. He was homeless. But before that, he was already forgotten. No one noticed his fall. Neighbors stopped recognizing him. Former customers found new carpenters. Government aid meant long lines, confusing forms, and indifference. Slowly, Avi slipped into the cracks of the system. One morning, sitting on a stone wall by the city walls, he thought, people shouldn't be forgotten this easily. But he was. Years passed. His name was only mentioned by a few security guards. Watch out. There's someone sleeping on the corner. No one saw the craftsman, the artist, the man who had lost his wife. No one noticed his loss. Until that morning, when a black car stopped nearby. 3. Netanyahu's turning point. That morning, Benjamin Netanyahu decided to change his routine. Normally, he went to the gym with his bodyguards. But that day, he wanted to walk outdoors. We need to mingle with the people, he told his advisors. Every day, the cameras and meetings. I want to hear the streets. His guards were cautious, keeping their distance. But Netanyahu's attention was fixed on a pile on the street. At first, he thought it was a blanket. But then he saw eyes staring back, tired, empty, forgotten. Avi. That man's eyes were dead, but his body still fought. Netanyahu approached and knelt down. He asked for his name. Just Avi, came the faint reply. From that moment, Netanyahu's world shifted. He gave a simple order. Find this man. Sir? Find Avi. Learn everything about him. But tell no one. For Netanyahu, this wasn't a media stunt. It was a silent awakening. Years later, he felt the trembling of conscience for the first time in a long while. 4. Silent pursuit, searching for Avi. Netanyahu's order sparked a quiet operation. No headlines. No flashbulbs. His trusted aide, Yigal, began digging into government records. Finding AVI was harder than expected. His official ID was expired. His last registered address was an abandoned apartment in Kadamon. Social services had lost track of him years ago. 2 plainclothes officers began discreet surveillance, tracking AVI movements over several days. They watched where he found food, where he slept, and whom he spoke to. These weren't just reports. They were portraits of a man, slowly vanishing from society's map. Yigal compiled a detailed dossier. Name, AVI Ben David. Birth year, 1962. Former profession, carpenter. Marital status, widower. Last known address, Kadamon, evicted in 2014. Health status, malnourished, possible mental health issues. Netanyahu read the report silently. A man dies not from hunger, he murmured, but from losing hope. A home to return to, the search for shelter. Plans were made swiftly but with discretion. A small apartment was sought in a quiet but safe neighborhood, not far from the city center. It needed ground floor access. Stairs were too difficult for AVI. Basic furniture, bed, fridge, table, chair. Complete anonymity, purchase made with Netanyahu's private funds, no publicity. Within days, a modest apartment was found in Beit Hakram. Sunlight poured through the windows. The street outside was calm. Netanyahu asked one question. Can we put a chair by the window? His aide blinked. A chair? Yes. So he can watch the sun. A man should be able to watch the sun in the morning. The apartment was purchased. Then a small team was assembled, a psychologist, a social worker, and a medical nurse, all sworn to secrecy. They would help AVI adjust, but never reveal who had helped him. Because this was not a show. It was a quiet victory against oblivion. 6. The first step, is this real? 7 days later, AVI sat on the same stone near King David Street. His worn coat and knitted hat did little to hide his fragility. A man approached him with a gentle smile. Mr. Ben David. AVI squinted suspiciously. Yes? We would like you to come with us for a medical checkup and a warm meal. Will you come? AVI, unused to kindness, nodded hesitantly. He stood, wobbling slightly. That day, AVI had his hair trimmed and face shaved for the first time in years. Clean clothes replaced his tattered garments. The car took him to Beit Hakram. He had never dared to enter such a neighborhood. When the door opened, he smelled soap and cleanliness. A fridge stocked with yogurt, fruit, milk, fresh towels and bedding. And by the window, the chair. This is for me, he whispered. The social worker nodded. Yes, Mr. AVI. This is your home. For the first time in years, AVI smiled. Then he cried quietly, overwhelmed. I was remembered, he whispered. 7. Quiet walls, talking memories. AVI struggled to sleep the first night in his new home. Lying on a soft bed, knowing the door was locked and the walls were solid, it felt surreal. But silence was dangerous. Memories flooded in. He recalled the first time he met Lee in the park, the broken bench where she smiled. Their first small home, the coffee mornings together. Those memories had been buried beneath years of cold streets. Now, they called to him again. He wept quietly, tears long restrained. Looking at the old wooden chair by the window, a thought came. If Lee were alive, I would share this view with her. But then, for the first time in years, hope blossomed. I am alive. 2 words heavy with meaning. 8. Silent watch, Netanyahu's vigil. Netanyahu received weekly reports from Yigal. AVI started reading books. Psychologist meetings are positive. He began watering flowers in the garden. Today, he offered to make wooden toys for neighborhood children. Reading these lines, Netanyahu sighed not as a politician, but as a man, a father, a friend. He had managed crises involving thousands. But watching one man's quiet recovery brought a unique peace. He vowed one thing, never to meet AVI face to face. This wasn't his heroism. It was AVI fight, a man rising from shadow. Netanyahu had only cleared the path. 9. The workshop, hands that shape wood. 2 months passed. AVI had settled in. Smiles returned. Every morning at 8, he drank coffee on the chair by the window. Yet, his hands, once a carpenter's tools, longed for work. He asked the social worker, "Can I have a small workshop here?" "Of course," she answered. An unused storage room in the building's basement was transformed. Basic tools, an old vise, the scent of sawdust filled the air. The workshop came alive. AVI's first creation was a wooden birdhouse. He hung it on the House of Hope, the neighborhood's hero. Beit Hakram was a quiet neighborhood. People greeted each other but kept their distance. One morning, a newspaper delivery boy found a carved wooden pencil box on the building's doorstep. A gift from AVI. Slowly, the neighborhood's attitude began to shift. Children came to his workshop. Parents whispered about that kind carpenter. No one knew his past homelessness. AVI did not speak of it. For him, the past was ashes. He lived only for today. One late afternoon, the doorbell rang. AVI opened the door to find a man holding a small package. "Mr. AVI," he said, "I brought a gift. Someone asked me to deliver it but wished to remain anonymous." AVI unwrapped the package. Inside was a leather-bound book titled Holding On to Life. On the first page, a handwritten note read, "Sometimes being a leader is placing a chair by the window. A friend." AVI wept again, but this time, tears of joy. One morning, AVI built a door from leftover wood in his workshop. It was no ordinary door. Carved into its panels were names, drawings, stories, memorials for the many homeless he once knew. He placed the door in the backyard with a small sign. "A door can always be opened." The neighborhood treated it as a shrine. People left notes, prayers, and touches. AVI was no longer just a carpenter. He was a guardian of hope. 13. The final encounter, looking through the same window. 3 years had passed. AVI hair had turned completely white, but his eyes retained their warmth. His small workshop hadn't grown, but its impact had. Young carpenters asked to learn from him, but he always answered, "I only let my hands speak. The rest is up to you." One afternoon, the doorbell rang softly. AVI opened to find a familiar, aged face. "Hello, AVI," Netanyahu said quietly. For a moment, AVI paused, then smiled faintly. "I recognized you. It's been years." "Yes, but some debts don't fade with time. I wanted to say thank you. Maybe it's late, but it's sincere." AVI stepped aside, inviting him in. They sat quietly by the small wooden table with cups of tea and olives. Netanyahu looked out the window where children played. "The sound of this street has changed," he said. AVI nodded. "Because we were silent. The voices belonged to them." Netanyahu handed AVI a small envelope. Inside was a note. "You didn't just change one man's life, you changed a whole neighborhood." Tears slipped down AVI cheeks. Netanyahu stood, offered his hand. "I'll visit again." AVI smiled. "My door is always open." One real, one symbolic in the backyard. Netanyahu disappeared into the shadows of the street. AVI left his door open. 14. Epilogue, the 2 cups by the window. The next morning, the neighborhood returned to routine. But on AVI windowsill, 2 cups sat side by side. One full. One empty. One for AVI. One for whoever might come. Because AVI no longer just lived, he gave life.